And we're live. Hey, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the heck in the world you are. It is the one and only V, the Guerrilla Economist. And we have the one and only Harley Schlanger. He needs no introduction. If you've been living under a stone or a rock or a Neolithic or a space or some sort of weird warp portal, Harley is the man when it comes to understanding a lot of the geopolitical, geoeconomic moves that are happening in this emerging, sprung upon all of us, multipolar world as we're witnessing the end of the the old Anglo-American power structure, the quote-unquote New World Order, and we're seeing a new sovereignty, a new populism that is arising globally. And Harley's the one that paints that picture for us. You can check out his work over at theschillerinstitute.org as well as larouchepack.com. And with that being said, Harley, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Fee. It's a pleasure to be on with you again.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, Harley. I mean, my God, lots of things have transpired in the last few days. The Bill Barr investigation with John Durham has now officially turned into a full-on criminal investigation. Letters have been served. Notices have, sources have told me that that letters have went out to the following people: Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Lynch, and Rice, from what I can tell. They are now going to be questioned as part of a criminal act, a criminal conspiracy, for lack of a better word. Harley, what does this do to the criminals that have been running roughshod for so long with no sort of regard for the law?
Well, if I were a high-priced corrupt lawyer, I'd be calling Brennan and Comey and Clapper right now to try and take some money from them. These guys are in big trouble, and it's the day they never thought would come.
Yes.
And again, some people think it sounds like a broken record when we say, look, these guys committed crimes, and there is a possibility that they're going to have to pay for those crimes. And since it hadn't happened yet, I know probably a lot of your listeners were saying, hey, come on, Trump is part of the Zionist mafia. These guys are never going to do anything.
Harley, you're breaking up a little bit. Can you repeat that again? You said a lot of people say, go ahead.
Sorry, hopefully this will work. I was saying that there are a lot of people who've had the attitude that Barr's corrupt, he's no good, you can't trust Trump, he's part of the Zionist mafia. They're never going to pull the trigger. And the fact of the matter is that if Trump's presidency is going to survive, he's got to pursue these leads. And as he said, he's not just doing it for himself, but for any future president. If you can have the intelligence community run a sting operation against your campaign and get away with it, then being president means nothing. It means you're just going to be another lackey like Obama or the Bush family. So I think the people who sold Trump short and who had given up on the idea that justice will be done, I'm hoping that they're going to be in for a big shock when they see that there will actually be some positive outcome of this criminal investigation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all the facts are starting to come out, especially what they've done to George Papadopoulos, what they've done to Carter Page, and now it was released, Harley, that the lawyers for General Michael Flynn have come out and they have the court papers.
Yeah,
where the FBI, headed by Peter Love Triangle Strzok, you know about Peter Love Triangle Strzok, the one who was engaged in a love triangle with Lisa Page, as well as Andrew McCabe. How sick and twisted is this, Harley? It's remarkable. And the fact that this love triangle was working cohesively to create fabricated evidence to make General Page, to make General Michael Flynn think that this was some sort of just a random questioning of the FBI, not knowing that it was literally a setup in order to catch him in a lie. I mean, all this is coming out. They cannot be sitting well, Harley. I don't know how this is not going to go back all the way to Obama.
Well, V, what's interesting on the Flynn case is that there's now documentation that Lisa Page changed the 302 form.
Yes.
Changed what he said and that this is why her boyfriend, Peter Strzok, initially said, well, I don't think he was lying. And then he turned around and said, oh, I see. We now have the new 302s. I guess he was lying. So,
Mm.
you have this evidence coming out. Also, that Flynn was being set up with a Russian national girlfriend who was working for the CIA, that they were running the classic honeypot sting with him. Look, it's all so dirty and sordid. The only thing you can figure, since these guys are not morons, is that they figured they could get away with it because Hillary would win. And now that Hillary not only didn't win, but their Mueller escapade failed, this latest Ukraine story is going to flop because there's nothing to it. They're going to be standing there with no defense. And Durham is a serious prosecutor. He's going to flesh out the details. He already has the story on Joseph Mifsud, who was part of the FBI sting operation against Papadopoulos. Mifsud has his lawyer turned over 2 cell phones and also videotapes in which it's reported that Mifsud acknowledged that he was working for the British and the FBI, not for the Russians. Now, Mueller, on page 5 of his report, said Mifsud was a Russian agent. So, anyone who's still running around talking about Russian hacking and Russian interference is a fool and deserves whatever they get. And that includes Clapper, that includes Brennan. These guys know there's nothing to the Russia story except they wanted to have a war with Russia. And that's why they were backing Hillary. And Trump said it during the campaign. I hope people remember this. He said Hillary's proposal for a no-fly zone over Syria will lead to a possible war, including a possible nuclear war with Russia. Is this what we want? And of course, most people don't want that. The only ones who could want that are people in the military-industrial complex who have convinced themselves that the Russians would back down and we would win.
Yeah.
Or that we could win a limited nuclear war. So these are people who are certifiably insane. Maybe that's going to be Clapper's defense, because what he said on CNN the other day, when he admitted that Obama was the one who told him to compile the dossier on Trump, and then he said, well, what were we supposed to do? Blow off the commander in chief and not do what he was telling us to do? He obviously forgot that when the Nazis tried to use that excuse during the Nuremberg trial, that they were just following orders, it didn't spare them from prison or the death penalty. So I think Clapper and others are in big trouble. And I think, like the rats they are, they'll start pointing fingers at each other. They already have.
Yeah, absolutely. Harley, all over the world, right now we're seeing all sorts of what many deem to be a populist uprising, everything from Argentina, Chile, Hong Kong, Guinea, Haiti, United States. Well, I can't say the United States. We're in the midst of a color revolution. The UK, France with the yellow vests, Indonesia, Egypt, Sudan. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, Harley.
Don't forget Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany.
Yes.
Farmers. Yes. There was a tractorcade of 1,000 tractors through Bonn, Germany, the other day. And Mrs. LaRouche, who has been saying for the longest time that she won't believe it's a global revolution until she sees a German or two wake up, was really quite excited to see these tractors in Bonn, and I think 17 other cities. And what were they protesting? The EU tax policy and the EU agriculture policy, which is green. Yeah. If you don't go green, you get taxed out of existence. And if you go green, you get subsidies. But you may not be able to produce any food. So, this is too much for farmers who tend to be among the most moral people, because they actually believe that they were put on earth for the purpose of feeding people, not to have a zero carbon emission footprint.
Correct. What are they going to do next, Harley? Are they going to throw Greta Thunberg in front of these tractors, almost like a Tiananmen Square, but a green version of it?
Well, I'm sure she would be happy to march into a tractorcade, but I don't think that's their plan. Look, I think that there are two things to watch out for. And before we go into that, let me mention one other thing. The killing of Baghdadi
Mm.
is significant in that we were told that Trump's decision to withdraw from Syria would mean the end of our war against ISIS, and ISIS would regenerate, would grow and expand and become a threat to the United States again. And in the midst of all that growing and blather, we just took out the leader of the caliphate. Now, it's you don't know yet what to make of this in terms of the broader picture. But those people who are underestimating Trump, again, have shown that their strategic analysis is not worth a damn thing. And the fact that the Russians provided air cover for the Delta team that was involved in the operation, that this was
Wow.
a Trump Putin cooperation operation, that they're going to continue to collaborate to support the sovereignty of Syria. These are all extraordinary developments
Yes.
that go towards supporting this idea of national sovereignty. Now, the two things that we have to watch out for is one, false flag terror attacks that would be used to say, see, Trump didn't really stop ISIS. And the second thing would be pulling the plug on the stock market, which right now they're pumping 25, 40, 60, 80, $100 billion into overnight markets to give enough liquidity for these swindlers to be able to cover their shortfall on a 24-hour basis. And then they have to give the money back the next day and line up again the next night. So and then on top of that, they've now announced $60 billion a month in quantitative easing, that the Fed is reversing the deleveraging from the bailout. They're now once again buying worthless assets from the banks to the tune of $60 billion a month. So all of this shows that there's something big going on with the financial system, whether it's Deutsche Bank or Bank of America collapsing, whether it's an insurance company's derivative obligations blowing out, whether it's a hedge fund that's gone upside down. No one knows for sure, except that something big is happening. And one of the ways you know it is all the loudmouths on CNBC aren't saying a word about it. This
Right.
is big news. I mean, we're talking about 100 billion overnight lending, which hasn't
Huge.
happened since when? 2008.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's QE infinity, man. It's remarkable. Like, we literally sit around calling the pots black when we talk about other countries and their central banks and how they're stimulating and propping up their markets, but yet no one really talks about what we do over here, which is a tantamountly way bigger amount than anywhere in the rest of the world.
Well, the old plunge protection team, as it was once called, is back in business.
Yeah.
And they've got a bigger plunger than ever, but we're not sure what they're flushing into the markets.
Yeah.
We know what they're buying. They're buying crap. And
Yeah.
they're buying it to keep the face value up there so that there's not a domino style collapse. Look, even the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, was forced to admit that if you had a contraction of a mild recessionary type of about 2%, that 1/3 of the total corporate debt would go under, would blow up. That's about $5 trillion. That would start a very large tremor in the banking system. And I think what we're seeing is these demonstrations. For example, the Argentine vote. Macri, who was just voted out as president, was a Goldman boy, but more importantly, he's a Friedmanite. He comes from the Chicago school that believes in austerity for the population, shut down any kind of investment in science and technology, and allow the swindlers who run private central banks to control the economy. And just as in Chile, it didn't work. And so now you have in Argentina an overwhelming vote against him. In Chile, you have millions in the street protesting the Pinera government. He's another Wall Street guy. So you see the same thing in France with the farmers in the yellow vests turning on Macron and his banker buddies. So, you can't say it often enough. There's what used to be called a mass strike process underway. And the only question is, will farmers and unemployed and the working poor find solutions as opposed to just angry demonstrations. And that's why at LaRouche PAC, we're continuing to fight to get people to understand why you need banking reform such as Glass-Steagall, so that there'll never again be a bailout of swindlers.
Yeah.
There'll never again be an open line between investment banks, or a free path, I should say, between investment banks and depositors' cash or depositors' savings or pension funds. That's got to be shut down. We've got to protect people's savings. And one of the ways you protect savings is you make sure it's invested in something that's real, as opposed to letting swindlers grab it and put it into a Ponzi scheme.
Right.
So Glass-Steagall is a critical first step to stopping the criminality. Now, once you've done that, then you've started the process by which a certain amount of capital is made available for investment in necessary areas of the economy, including mom and pop shops, small entrepreneurs, but also industrial manufacturing, and create an opening for research and development funding, which was largely attacked in the whole Michael Milken junk bond era, when they said, we don't need research and development, that money should be going into the new financialization. So I think these are the kind of solutions that we have to put out there for people, so they can see that the problem is not credit generation in itself, it's where the credit generation is going. And if you're generating credit through private central banks on the bill of taxpayers, and the money is going to swindlers who are running Ponzi schemes, that's not a good idea. And that has to be shut down. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned here from 2008. And I would encourage people to go to LaRouchePAC.com and read up on what Lyndon LaRouche said after the 2008 crash about what we have to do to once and for all put an end to this funny money system, this floating exchange rate system, the system that's exploited by swindlers like George Soros, and that benefits people like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and these types Mark Zuckerberg, who have taken billions and done what? They've created fiefdoms that make all of us more stupid and more dependent on their control of information.
Yeah, absolutely, man. 100% agree with that wholeheartedly. Harley, closing comments. What do you think is going to be playing out in the next several days, several weeks, and how do you think this right now? It looks like the genie's out of the bottle, and the unipolar world is dying a death of 1,000 cuts.
Well, when you bring that up, it's absolutely the case that what we've seen now in terms of the Middle East is a twofold process. One, support for sovereign nations. If you look at what the U.S. did under Bush with Iraq, and then under Obama with Libya and Syria, it was to deny nations, and also Ukraine, to deny nations the right to their own sovereign future. And now we're seeing nations being put back on their feet, supported by other nations, including Russia, including China, and now including Donald Trump, to reassert their sovereignty over their territory and their economy. So what happened with Syria is a perfect example of a restoration of a principle of sovereignty. But now we need sovereign economic development. And this again requires cooperation. So that's one part of the process that's underway. But it's not going to work unless you knock out the forces that are the globalists who oppose sovereignty. And that's where the Durham report is so important, the Horowitz report, sticking with this idea that we're going to find out what was behind Russiagate. I mean, we already know, but it needs to be exposed so that every American understands that this was an operation that came out of people like John Brennan and Clapper working with MI6 in London, the Five Eyes intelligence community, which is essentially the British Commonwealth intelligence, a small corrupt network in the Italian intelligence agency, which has all been fired, and corrupt Ukrainians. These are the networks that were responsible for Russiagate, and they're very much exposed now. the reason Schiff and Pelosi are doing such a crazy impeachment dance is they don't want this Ukrainian thread unraveled. But that's exactly what Barr and Durham are doing. And so hopefully, I mean, we're in a sense in a race. Who's going to get there first? Will it be Durham and Barr, or will Schiff overwhelm the country with the lies they're presenting on this Ukraine story to poison the country against Trump? That's their intention, to get enough Republicans convinced that Trump is not going to get reelected so that they can get 20 of them to vote for conviction in the Senate. And as Roger Stone said the other day, the alternative is Trump has to keep going into these battleground states where there are weak Republican senators and show them that their base supports Trump. And so we've got this kind of a fight to get the story out and to make sure it's heard by the people who are such weaklings that they would go along with Adam Schiff and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I had a birdie tell me this morning via text that, quote, don't bet the farm on it, but there's a strong chance that a certain war goddess will try to announce her candidacy either on the 29th or 30th of this month. So waiting and seeing for that one.
Well, if she's going to do it, she should do it on the 31st and come out as the Wicked Witch of Halloween.
That should be exactly it.
That would be more fitting.
Mm-hmm.
And that way,
Absolutely.
after people started laughing, she could always say it was a Halloween joke.
Yeah. They can't leave well enough alone, Harley. They really can't. And
well, they're trying to monetize the Great Pumpkin, V.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What do you mean?
They're trying to steal whatever they can. So if you have a nice pumpkin in your yard, just keep an eye on it.
That's it. It might disappear.
Yeah.
It might get Arkansas.
But I've been writing a lot about this, and as you know, and a lot of your regular listeners know, I had the Flynn story 2 years ago from people in the intelligence community that Flynn was targeted because he knew the details of Obama, the CIA, and the intelligence agencies running guns to Al-Qaeda and ISIS through Benghazi, through Turkey. And that's why they had to get rid of him. We had the story on Manafort at LaRouche PAC, that Manafort was not a Putin operative, but he was trying to steer Ukraine between the EU and the Eurasian Union. And they concocted this fake story of a black ledger that had all these payments to Manafort, which Mueller asserted was real, and used that to convince Manafort that he can't fight this. He's going to have to eventually, I mean, they used that in the trial against him. And Manafort's attorney said that there was never such a thing as a black book. This was manufactured by the networks with the corrupt prosecutor that was Biden's buddy. So these stories are going to come out. We've had it from the beginning. And if people would like to be reading my blog page on a regular basis, send me an email to my personal email address at harleysch@gmail.com. And I'll send you a link for free to my blog page. And this way we can keep more and more people ahead of the stories so that we can direct the counter coup. And I think that's what's important. Don't rely on President Trump on his own. We've got to have an American population that's educated, that's up to date, and that is ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. Harley, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this information with us. Folks, there's a lot of things going on, and the world is moving at such an alarming pace. So keep it locked over here. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, as well as a thumbs up, and you will be alerted to the latest happenings and every single time when Harley comes on. I want to thank all of you for listening in. This is V and Harley signing out.